So, all right. So next topic is about Texas ranking 50th on Cato's personal freedom score.
What?
Yeah. 17th in overall, 50th when it comes to personal freedom. So let's take a look at what they had to say.
It's very different than, say, a state like Texas, which is number 17 overall, but a big part of that is because they're number 50 on personal freedom. Well, they've been working on expanding educational choice in Texas, and that would help. And I haven't looked recently, but weren't they just in a special session on this?
Yeah, it failed.
It failed. The biggest issue is that their crime-adjusted incarceration rates are really high. Governor Rick Perry, the Texas Public Policy Foundation, lots of conservatives in what is called the Right on Crime effort were in favor of changing Texas laws because they realized that, they had an incarceration problem. And that drives a lot of Texas's problems on personal freedom. I find it absolutely absurd that a place that cares so much about freedom would not have a better educational system. I understand the politics of Texas for why this happens, but it shows you that the commitment to freedom that Texas usually talks about is some measure true and some measure hype. And I hate to say that about the great Lone Star State. It's a great place, but it needs to do better if it wants to continue to talk about freedom.
Yeah, I mean, it is one thing to punish violent criminals, which we all support, and there's even a case for.
All right, I'm going to cut it off there. He goes on to talk a little bit about how you can still be sentenced to life in Texas for marijuana charges. And so, it's kind of crazy. And I 100% agree with him. I'm going to write a column on this because I think Texas does do this thing where we love to talk about freedom and we love to talk about how don't mess with Texas and this and that and the other, but yet we rank really low. And even if you look at what they ranked and what they used to calculate that ranking, I mean, it's pretty fair. They looked at things like ESA, school choice, whether or not you have the ability to find the school that best fits your kids' needs. They looked at the fact that we allow local governments to use license plate readers unregulated. They looked at how we still have no reform of civil asset forfeiture laws, how high our local taxes and debt are, how we still have some insurance mandates, how occupational licensing is high, how nurse practitioners are overregulated and enjoy no freedom of independent practice. We have price gouging laws, controlling for the crime rates, incarceration's high. Our cannabis laws are very strict. 7 grams or more carries a mandatory minimum of 6 months. We banned mostly harmless psychedelic Salvia divinorum, which I'm not even familiar with that is, but we banned that in 2013.
You don't know what that is. Okay.
I've heard of Salvia. I don't know if that's the same thing, but
I'm pulling it out of them. What else have you heard of?
Gambling, and there's a whole host of other things. But I mean, it's interesting because we talk a lot about personal freedom and we don't allow people to be personally free.
You just listed a whole shitload of things that we don't have freedom on. And I'm not arguing with any of it at this point, but we were still ranked 17th overall.
Mostly carried by our economic freedom.
Okay, so
we ranked
business, and you can do business here, but if you get caught with a little bit of weed, lifetime in jail, straight to jail. Off you go. You want to send your kid somewhere else? You want to keep your money, send your kid somewhere else? You can start the private school as a business, but don't you dare take the kids. Bitch, what?
But yeah, you're right. 17th overall, mostly boosted by our economic freedom. The regulatory freedom was decent. And then we were weighed heavily down by our personal freedom, which I think is probably more important than most.
But it seems like most people disagree with you, though.
Because we haven't changed that stuff? Yeah, probably.
Well, no, not necessarily that, but because Michael's on mute again, his dog's acting up. Because people keep moving here, right? And yes. I mean, maybe, of course, whatever. If I'm going to move to, I don't know, North Dakota, I'm probably not going to do a lot of research and what's their regulatory environment? I'm just going to, is there an opportunity for me to move there that makes sense for me economically, maybe, or maybe family? I don't know, like typical reasons. People aren't going to go look at the laws.
Right.
What am I going to do if I get caught with 7 grams worth of marijuana? Right. But still, I mean, people move here and it's not changing. And a lot of people keep moving here. And so it kind of seems like maybe the economic policy, I mean, I tend to agree with you, Charles. Personal freedom is, that's very important. If you ask me which one is more important, economic or personal, I think they kind of intertwine a little bit. But
Yeah, I think they kind of intertwine, and I think ultimately, yeah, people should move in here because the economy rules, right? Like it's the economy dictates how you vote. It dictates where you choose to live. If I'm moving somewhere, if I have a $500,000, if I have $1 million house in California and I'm selling it, and I'm getting a nicer $500,000 house in Texas, I'm not necessarily Googling whether or not civil asset forfeiture is legal in Texas. Like I'm going to move because of the economic factors. But you're right. I think they probably go hand in hand. I do put personal freedom a little higher, but ultimately, I guess the fact that people are still moving here and businesses are starting and we're leading in the economy proves that Texas wins the day based on the economy, I guess, for now.
Yeah. No, you're right. My dogs were going crazy, barking very loudly. Yeah, I mean, it's always freedom in the judgment of freedom. Like we're just using the term freedom as like an eye of the beholder. And this is CATO Institute. They're going to emphasize criminal justice issues. 3 things that I was surprised to not see on there: abortion, not on the list; vaccines, not on the list; and trans surgeries, not on the list. Yeah, I mean, the Texas culture is conservative and Christian.
On some of that a little bit.
Why? Look at this list here. They've got Charles.
Why you just say whatever you want on the show and not get asked why?
Yeah, well, they have gambling. Are you free to gamble? They have gun rights. Can you own guns? They have
I'm saying expand on why you think that. So you said abortion, you said transgender, genital mutilation, and what was the other one you said?
Vaccines.
Yeah. He's saying because they counted everything else, why'd they exclude those 3 things? Which I don't know either. I'm not
making a judgment on whether on any of those issues. Really, I'm just saying I was surprised to not see them here. If you're talking about freedom, personal freedom.
Well, as a former transgender man,
you've got
you're vegan. I just assume
you got asset forfeiture on here. I mean, asset forfeiture surely impacts less people than mandatory vaccines, I would assume, and it's probably
on the vaccine issue. I mean, I guess they should have included it, right? Because you can easily opt out of vaccines here in Texas.
Yeah,
super easy.
Everywhere.
For schools, yeah.
It's really for schools. What about employment? Like not all employment.
I've never had a job ask me if I'm vaccinated. I don't think.
If you work at a hospital.
Well, we just passed the legislation that says your employer cannot require vaccines. So prior to that, presumably.
But I thought that law excluded. Yeah. I thought that law excluded because they were saying that I think UT Health here could still do it or something like that. I thought it excluded something, whether it was schools, maybe not. It was schools. Okay, so medical school, they could still require it. And I guess if you work there, maybe, I don't know. Because I remember seeing some tweets about how it wasn't, wasn't all encompassing. I don't know the details of it.
But seeing this, I'm a fan of CATO. I don't like their, the Koch's recent news that they made. And we'll probably talk about that in a little bit. But seeing this through their lens, I mean, that doesn't surprise me that they rated Texas at the bottom. We have it's Texas, it's the South, it's overwhelmingly Christian, it's formerly older, and there's a hard on crime culture here that hasn't allowed things as obvious as allowing people to smoke weed if they want to, hasn't allowed that to pass the legislature, and therefore an infringement on personal freedom. Because if you don't have the right to smoke weed, like you're a slave. Not a slave, but you know what I mean. You're not free. Bad choice of words. You're not free.
Well, and salvia, I Googled it. It's a perennial herb in the mint family that is abused for hallucinogenic effects.
It's you, dog. What's up?
So it's in the mint family, and we banned it in 2013-14. And I remember now because I remember seeing all these news stories about people going to the park, smoking it, and passing out and stuff. But we banned that, and like you said, we don't include some of this other stuff. It's interesting. It is CATO, right? So yeah, I think you kind of take that for what it's worth. Are we technically in the South, or are we in the West?
South?
Is Texas
South?
I thought Texas was Western. I guess maybe I'm mistaken.
Maybe, I don't know. I always get that confused. too. We might be West. I don't know.
Because I feel like the culture between like the Deep South and Texas is wildly different. I feel like Texas is more like the West states, but okay, it's neither here nor there.
Well, I mean, we are literally in the middle of the United States, and we're at the very bottom. I don't know how we get like mixed up with the West. I feel like we should be. I don't know what it is, but is your point, Michael, just saying like they should add these things to the list, and which direction do you think our number would go? You think we become less free?
Well, should they add those things to the list? I mean, they have marriage freedom on here. Why don't they have women's reproductive freedoms on here?
Yeah. And quite frankly, I think because it's Cato, if they were to add those things to the list, we'd probably be even lower. Like I would assume from where Cato's coming at, where Cato is on the ideological spectrum, that they would probably not boost our rating based on those issues.
I guess my point of bringing all that up is not to advocate one way or another. It's to say that this is a very specific definition that Cato has come up with that doesn't necessarily include all freedoms. So it's viewed at from what the CATO Institute cares about, and knowing that that's what they care about. Yeah, I mean, I'm not surprised they're ranking Texas low. They're trying to shame them into moving on some of these more non-controversial issues that, like, Ohio voters just passed cannabis, decriminalization, and Texas still is criminalizing people for small amounts of marijuana possession.
Maybe you guys just got 420 blazing all the time.
I don't even smoke weed.
He's lying.
I have.
He's
no,
high
I
right
really
now.
don't.
High
no,
right now.
I don't.
Wait, so okay, in your estimation though, would you not say that Texas is not where would you rank Texas? Because I don't think Texas, I think based on a lot of the stuff that they rated, but even on things that they did not rate, I would still say Texas is not very high on the personal freedom list. Like, I feel like we're much more, we're definitely more conservative than we are libertarian, and conservatives, I don't think, have an issue using government to direct the public in a way that they think the public should be. And so, like, even like qualified immunity things, I don't think they counted qualified immunity on that, but that's there's so many things we just don't address. And the fact that my license plates can still be ran like all willy-nilly by officers without kind of some restraint there, I think it's kind of crazy. So I wouldn't rate it high, take or leave what Cato ranked.
What are you hiding, Charles?
For my life. I mean, nothing. I just don't want to get pulled over for no reason. They should not just be driving around.
If you got nothing to hide, why would you get pulled over, man?
That's their argument.
Oh,
what's going on,
get out of here with that. Get out. Oh my gosh. This guy's straight out of the NSA making 2013 arguments against Edward Snowden.
Hey, all I got to say is I saw something and I said something, okay? No big deal.
Here's something I got to say. We have a Fourth Amendment. What does the Fourth Amendment say?
I stopped reading after the first.
Oh. Well, we have God-given right to prohibit. The government cannot search or seize anything of ours without a warrant, including our license plate number.
Well, what about that cash that they love seizing here in Texas?
Yeah, the problem is that conservatives, like Charles said, have no problem using government force to push their social agenda, which is not the conservatives. I won't say the conservatives. I'll say the Republican Party has no problem using government force to infringe on individual liberty when it supports their worldview, and that's one of the biggest problems with the Republican Party, right there.
I will say, I'm obviously joking around a little bit here. I actually don't think that you smoke weed, Michael. I don't want people to think that I was serious and that I was like revealing. I don't think that you do. I don't think he does. Probably because you're a square.
No, I definitely have partooken.
You sound like you have. Look at you.
Some of my brain cells are dead.
Maybe you shouldn't have partaked.
Excuse me.
I don't particularly like.
Would you like to partook in some of the marijuanas, maybe?
But what's the past tense? But
I'd
much prefer a mushroom to weed. It's not my speed.
Woo!
Yeah.
It is partook.
Okay. Partook. I definitely have partook in the marijuana.
Well, let's talk about speaking of